If you're like most black or African people, then the thoughts that you have about your grandparents are usually about them telling you stories about Bunny the rabbit, stealing maize from the farmer, and other imaginary characters. Now, the grandma that I feature in today's video shares a story about how they never used to go to McDonald's in the 1960s. And when she decided to go there, she shares her perspective on what took place, and she gets very emotional, and well, it's very touching. So I decided to share this video with you guys. So she says that back in the day, McDonald's wasn't like the way we know McDonald's right now. They used to prevent black people from going there. I mean, like most stores used to. But there's this instance or encounter she had there with some palm coloreds when she decided to go there with her sister, and she got really sad after they started name calling her. So let's get into that video, and we're gonna break it down at the end. I hope this is gonna be some sort of challenge for you guys, because she gets very emotional and you might even shed some tears.
I was raised primarily on 75th and Morgan. We for a while could not go past Ashland, and then we could not go past Damon. So about 10 years prior to this incident that happened to me in college, I was about 18, about 10, maybe 10 years prior. Everybody liked McDonald's, but McDonald's were not very plentiful in black communities. And they had finally built one that was kind of close, but not real close. And so one day I just got brazen enough. I had some money and I got brazen enough and said, I'm going to go to McDonald's. I did not ask for permission. I just decided I was going. My sister that's next to me, I put her on the seat of my bike, because that's how we rolled back in the day. She rode on the back of my bike. And then I went and stopped by another girlfriend of mine's house, and we all decided we're going to go. But in order to go to this McDonald's, it was on 79th Street and it was past Damon. So we rolled down 76th Street, and instead of going over to 79th Street, which probably would have been better, we were kind of afraid of riding in the busy streets. So we kept going down 76th Street, and we turned on a residential block. When we turned on the residential block, it was in the summertime, and all people were outside on their front yards and all of that. And all of a sudden we started hearing this chorus, "Let's go home, let's go home." I had never been called it before, but I'm pretty sure I knew that was something bad. And it was scary the way they were saying it. But for some reason, I didn't know what to do. First, I didn't know what to do. My friend that came with us, she rolled off and left me and my sister. And I decided that I wasn't going to be no day. So I got off my bike. I put my sister behind me and I told her, don't move. My daddy had given me a chain, and it wasn't a chain like you go to the store and buy and it's all neat and stuff. He had cut it off of another chain, and it was to lock my bike up, and it had a lock on the end of it. And I took it, I unwrapped it from my bike, and I wrapped it around my hand, and I just stood there with my sister behind me because something was going to happen, but I wasn't going to be there that day. So eventually, I don't know how I got the strength to put my sister back on the bike and get back on the bike. But we got away from there. And I went back home and I told my mother. And my mama put us in the car. She was real angry. But I don't know where the people went, because when we went back to the block, everybody was inside. I have never been so scared in my life. But I couldn't let nothing happen to my sister, because my father had always drilled in my head that I had to take care of my sisters. And I think that's probably why I just stopped and stood there. I don't know if I would have done that if I had been alone. But even to this day, my sister and I talk about this. And this has been well over 50 years ago almost. And we still feel the pain of just wanting to go to McDonald's like every other child. Last time I told this story, I did the same thing. I just want to add this. I did everything I could and prayed so hard that my children would never have to be called her, would never have somebody threaten them like my sister and I experienced. And I thought you all were going to make it. And it seems like we're going right back to that same place. Not being able to process why are these people so angry with me? Why are they calling me this? Why wasn't I supposed to ride across the street anyway? Why? Nobody ever talked about that. I think that when I was growing up, Black folks just accepted some things. This is just the way it is. And like I said, even, with the exception of this really, really poignant thing that my mom said to me at 10, which really, again, is one of those things I will never forget. And it did change my perspective to some degree. And of course, she followed it up with other things. She put me in charm school and, other things like that to try to help me. But yes, I think that if we hadn't been so afraid to talk about that, Black folks were scared people. I mean, I grew up afraid of people. I grew up feeling intimidated by folks. I grew up not feeling like I was as good as they were. And if you hear a tinge of anger in my voice, I'm still mad as hell about that. Because I feel like maybe my ACT scores wouldn't have been as low as they were if I had felt like I had a chance or I was as good as they were. So yes, it should have been talked about. We should have been empowered. But it was the time. It was just the time. People were afraid. Did not make good decisions in high school. My ACT scores were very low. And I was able to get into school through a special program. But once I entered college, I really enjoyed the coursework. I knew I always wanted to be an educator. So after my first year, I went to declare my major, and they had actually wanted you to wait until your second year. But I knew I wanted to be a teacher. So I went to the Department of Education, and I will never, ever forget this as long as I live. And this lady, Marie Gunther, came to the counter where I had completed my paperwork. And she looked at my paperwork, and she looked at me, and she looked at my records, and she said, "According to your ACT scores, you shouldn't have lasted a quarter here." I was crushed. But I was determined. I couldn't, first of all, believe that anybody who was in the field of education, especially higher education, would say something like that to somebody. But this is what it is, and this is what it's always been. But it inspired me to study extremely hard because the program that I was in was designed for me to stay there 5 years. I graduated in 4 years on the honors, on the dean's list. And it was a pleasure to go back and find this same woman still in this department and be able to slam my paperwork down on the counter for declaration of graduation 4 years after she made that comment. That was certainly one of the hardest things to deal with, but it also inspired me throughout other obstacles in my life. Probably because it just reminded me of other negative things that have been said to me that I, for a while, allowed to keep me down. I don't think I'm much different than some people when you encounter a lot of negativity. I experienced quite a bit of negativity growing up, and it really beat down my self-esteem for a while. And I guess maybe I just finally reached a point where I was tired of being underestimated and wanted to even prove to myself that I could do more than what people were expecting of me.
She pulls up on a bike, probably pink in color, with our little sister on the other seat, right? And she pulls up in front of these palm color people's houses, I guess. And I can just imagine the scene. Maybe they were grilling beef or something because they were seated outside. What else would they be doing outside? So maybe they were grilling beef. And as they saw somebody different to their color, they decided to start name calling her. And they called her the name that begins with an N and ends with Ga. And I'm not talking about sugar. Now, the thing that I want to point out is you can just see how some people think, and the way they think is not very, very proper, if you get what I'm saying, because the people of their age and the girl of her age at the time, she was very young to be called such a word, you know. That just shows you how people's mentalities are and how insensitive some folks are from other races. But anyways, maybe it's just the time, you know, maybe nowadays they've become more understanding. You can tell that Grandma has the spirit of a fighter because as she got off her bike, she was determined to respond in a way. So she got a chain that was on her bike and then she wrapped it around herself on her hand, trying to fight back. But I think when she realized that at the time, palm coloreds were seen as the lions of the community, I guess. You could not touch them. You know, it was like they were covered in flames at the time. And anybody who would just touch them would get scorched by the heat or something like that. So she decided to just sit back and went back home. But from the time she was telling that story, she got very emotional. So you can tell that she was very determined. You know, she was very determined to fight back. But the fact that she couldn't do so angered her. And that, my friends, was tears of anger. All right, there's tears of joy, tears of normal tears, I guess, but that was tears of anger. And you can just get the feeling and the vibe in the video that things were very different at the time. When she got on the street where the palm colors were living with her bike and her sister, you can feel when she's telling the story that those days there was a lot of fear when you come in contact with palm coloreds as a people of darker skin. You don't know how they're gonna react to you. You don't know what name they're gonna call you. The only thing you want to do is survive and make it. Give it up to Grandma, you know. You can even tell from the way she's aging gracefully. That tells you that she's a fighter. She's a person that wasn't gonna let anybody stand in her way. And throughout the story, she tells how she persevered and how she endured emotional trauma, how she endured discrimination and art to assist back in the days. And to all my friends out there in the US, my brothers and sisters from the Black community, I think times have really changed, and I guess art to assist and discrimination and stereotypes to do with racial injustices are not as severe as they used to be in those days because you guys have fought back. This is the generation of people that won't let nobody call them any name for no reason, you know. You rather fight back. And I think this generation of people around the world is very incredible. God has given us the strength to be able to fight back and to be able to resist oppression. We have said no to this discrimination. And that's the reason why she's saying at the time it was that way. I couldn't do anything. She starts crying because I heard that most of the times old people, before they even go to sleep with the ancestors, they have some sort of time to reflect on their life. You know, there's this scenario that I heard about that suggests that when people are about to go meet their ancestors, they first have a glimpse of their life. You know, it gets shown to them in a flash, you know, like maybe 7 seconds. And then they start seeing the things that they've done, the decisions they made. And most of the times, the things that appeal most, it is the negative things, the regrets that they had until the day they are on that bed. And Grandma here has some regrets. And one of those regrets is the fact that that day she would have fought back. That day she would have stood up for herself and for her little sister. But she couldn't. She was told to protect her little sister. She made a promise to her father, but you can see how that promise was eating her alive because she couldn't fulfill that promise in that moment. This is a testament that we should always be prepared regardless of what we find in the community. Sometimes you're gonna find people that are just ready to stop you. They're ready to be there and stand as obstacles in your way, but you gotta fight back. You have to find a way of fighting back because that regret is gonna eat you, you know, in your old age. But shout out to Grandma. During her educational career, she fought back. She managed to become an educator. It was a dream to one day stand in front of people and be able to speak out things that she's experienced from a professional standpoint, and I guess just from my life experience. And I think that desire stemmed from the fact that she didn't have any way of standing up for herself and for Black people out there. So she saw this as the only door for her to be able to relieve herself of the voices that were trapped in her mind and in her heart that she couldn't speak out in those days, you know. Now, the big question that I have for you guys is, do you think that discrimination and racial injustices have gone down compared to the time when grandma tells our story? Now, I did tell you that a lot of people from Africa and black people in general, the memories they have about their grandparents are the stories that they told them. You know, the stories that my grandparents told me are the ones that keep them close to me, you know. And grandma here is no different. Let us cherish this story, keep it in our hearts and in our minds, and be able to relate with our story and find some clues that suggest how we can act different in such a scenario. And I think the way I would act different if I was presented with such a challenge is I would air out my thoughts. I would air out whatever is in my heart at that time. You know, I would act in a way, maybe not violently, but I would rather say something or act in a type of way. But at the same time, I just want to say that it is very also important to be able to stand in any storm and be able to overcome it. That's the reason why sometimes you just have to look at yourself in a positive way, regardless of the negative things that people say about you. But that being said, like this video if you enjoyed today's discussion, and leave us your thoughts in the comment section. Subscribe to become part of our community. See you in the next one.